of Self-Love. I'm your host, Fatima Deoji, and today we journey into the world of self-love, mysticism, and the legacy, which is Hussein ibn Ali. Sayed, thank you so much for taking the time to come to my podcast, Micro Moments of Self-Love. I know you've had a very busy schedule, so I really appreciate it. And, the reason why I reached out to you is because when I did a little bit of research into your work, I know that you've spoken at a lot of different, universities and schools, and one of them is at Harvard Divinity School, right? And it says that you have a focus in Islamic mysticism, philosophy, theology, but mostly your central focus is on love. Am I right? Yeah. So I'm just interested, what got you to focus on love more than Islamic history or fiqh, or what is it about love that made you want to explore that?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. In regards to your question, I guess each human being is on their own journey, and I find that the concept of love is something that resonated with me from a very early age. So to give a bit of background on this, I guess it's like most children growing up, at least in the United Kingdom, there was quite a heavy emphasis on atheism. So as we were growing up, you could kind of prove God, but for me at least, you can feel God. So at a moment of crisis, at the age of 12, 13, 14, thinking, is there really a God? And with all the proofs that were put in front, intellectually you can rationalize it, but I guess it's something greater than that. You need to feel it. So I guess at the age of 16, I went for my first pilgrimage. And when I got to the shrine of the Imam at the time, Mashhad, you could feel this overflow of love. And I guess at that moment I came to realize that certain things are not rationalized, certain things are felt. It's important to be able to feel it, because at that time what I didn't realize was human beings are really made up of two entities. You've got the physical, but the physical perishes. But then you've got the soul, and the soul lives on. For as long as God is alive, the soul is alive. So it's not something that dies once it comes into creation. And for some reason, there's a fulfillment of the soul that took place. And from then onwards I realized, actually, there is a God. And I'll be honest, I don't think I wanted to come into this field, actually. The only reason I went to study what I did was in search of God, and I knew that there was no way you can just go directly into this field of love and mysticism, so to speak, or philosophizing without having some kind of credentials behind you. But I guess as the journey progressed, you see a lot of pain in the world, you see a lot of people suffering in the world. And I guess one of the big questions which are asked is that if there is a God, why is there suffering? Why are there people who are in situations which you see? And the only way I could answer it, or come to a conclusion within my own self, was through the lens of love. So I guess with 8 billion people, and even if you look at animals and so forth, there is an affinity. Whether it's a mother, whether it's a father, whether it's a husband or wife, whether it's friends, there is something that binds us. And that something, I guess, is that love which comes from the soul, so it resonates from the soul. And if we say God is love, He isn't loving, or you don't cuddle God. The thing is, God is love, He manifests that, and love goes back to goodness. Goodness goes back to mercy, and mercy goes back to existence itself. So from God's existence resonates love. And this is why we find that the most powerful thing within human beings is also the ability to love. So when, for example, there's a very famous tradition that we all quote, whether you're Sunni, Shia, Sufi, that kuntu kanzal makhfiya, I was a hidden treasure. فَأَحْبَبْتُ أَنْ أُعْرَفَ, I love to be known. So within that you come to realize that God as a hidden treasure was unknown, but the port of entry to come to know God, because He's infinite, is through love. And this is why you find that the heart is the haram of Allah. Haram of Allah meaning the sanctuary, but haram also, if you look at it, it also means that excluding everything other than. So if the heart has negativity, one can't truly come to understand the concept of what loving God is. But I guess when you begin to love God, you begin to love yourself. You begin to love people around you. And that empathy that overflows, I find that regardless of race, color or creed, when a person truly comes to understand the love of God, then you come to realize that it doesn't matter then what you are. Peace begins to flow. You resonate peace, and people around you are in peace. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
But that's the reason why, I guess, it's something that appeals to me.
You said something very interesting a few days ago. You said La ilaha illallah, right? It's that it's negating. It starts with a negative, right? And in the West, it's detachment. It's now detachment has become, this new word that has come up, right? And the whole idea of La ilaha illallah is like you're saying that I'm detaching everything before I get to God, right? And I just find that so interesting because I feel that the things that tie us down are whatever it is that is your ilah, right? Whether it is money or it is your partner or it is fame, whatever it is, it has the ability to manipulate you. It has the ability to have power over you, right? So I guess getting to God is almost stripping away everything, right? And yeah, basically it's a freedom that people believe that when you go to God there's all these rules and regulations, but in fact you are so free, right? Because there's nothing that can manipulate your state, and there's nothing that can shake you, right? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about mysticism. I think Shias, we focus a lot on mysticism. I'm sure there's the Sunnis and the Sufis, but can you explain mysticism to for someone who's a non-Muslim?
So, mysticism isn't just reserved for Muslims.
Yeah.
But you realize that this concept of mysticism is something which is found within all religions. Today, within Judaism, though there are different strands of mysticism, but you've got the Kabbalah, which really is a movement back towards the light. That, for example, if we are from the same light and we were fractured out, now the search of humanity really is to go back to that light again. And that light is non-suffering, in essence. And we suffer through separation from that source of light. So there is a movement that we can actually recognize within our own tradition, which is known as the illuminationist theology or philosophy of illumination. In the same way, you notice that in Christianity also, in particular in Catholicism, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, all of these, you could say, mystics, were people who suffered in their life, but through their suffering, as you rightly said, they stripped the world away from themselves. And they achieved this elation, that when you get there, regardless of how people may look at you and think, oh, this guy's suffering, but actually they weren't. What they were is they were attaching themselves to the one, union with God. And so you find this in Christianity. You look at Hinduism today, for example, some of their traditions, which are there of self-mortification and stripping oneself. Again, this idea of la ilah, which is found within Hinduism. If you look at the Advaita Vedanta, for example, Advaita Shankaracharya writes beautifully on the idea of stripping oneself and moving back to that source of light. You find it in Sikhism, Taoism, Buddhism. We could go through all the isms, but you find that there is a level of mysticism there. And really, it's the realization that there's something beyond this physical body. And to put it in layman's terms, look, we're all suffering. Whoever comes into this world suffers. A child cries at the point that they come into this world. And if he doesn't cry, or she doesn't cry, you're concerned what's happening here. So each one of us is suffering, and it's very simple why. We're restricted. You're restricted to your body, I'm restricted to my body. We're not infinite, we're not everywhere. And because of that we suffer. We suffer because your soul's infinite, so the desires are infinite. And if you go into business, the desire's money. You want to gain that money, and it's never ending. Why? Because your soul's infinite. If there was an end to it, you wouldn't be infinite, you wouldn't be human beings. But those people who have unlocked the reality, which is, let's get to God, they're infinitely moving in that direction. Somebody is an academic, they infinitely want to study books. You can put as much cash in front of them. If they're truly academics, they want to go back to their books. So in this way, you find that every human being wants to get to this infinity and wants to remove suffering from them. Now look, if I was to ask you a question, what is the purpose of your life? In a nutshell, you want peace, you want happiness. Everyone is in the pursuit of happiness. And this is why we do things. Even a bank robber, when they rob, evidently what they're looking at is in the pursuit of happiness. They think by doing this, I'm going to gain happiness. When a person lies, what are you doing? In the pursuit of that, maybe it's going to give me an edge to get to where I want to get to. So every human action, whether we like it or not, is not for God actually. It's actually in the pursuit of happiness. We want to be happy. And here mystics have come forward, and there's a synthesis. The outer of religions may be different. how we manifest it.
Right.
But you find in every single faith, the core is the same, which is the mystical dimensions of that. So what do we want? We've come to the realization that when we attach ourselves or gain union with the Absolute, what happens? You stop suffering.
Yeah.
Pain goes away. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you won't be tried and tested,
Yeah.
but it means that within all of the human tests that you may face, you'll be in balance. And this is why for us Imam Hussein is very important, because you notice that with all the worldly problems that he went through, with all the pain, trial and tribulation, the man is at peace. And that's what's phenomenal. Because if you look at it, to be in that situation whereby your children have been killed and your wife and your sisters are just about to be enslaved, and in the same way you've lost everything, but to be at peace and oneness with God is something which is phenomenal. And this is why I guess people come to God just looking at the story of Imam Hussein. Those people who believe in his message, they think to themselves, look, if a man like that exists, surely there's a God. So yeah, if you look at it, we're all in the same ship. We're all sailing to the same destination. Some of us have realized that there's something far more fulfilling, and that thing which is far more fulfilling is that union with God. With that though comes three things. With that comes the love, with that comes the mercy, and with that comes that internal peace. When that peace overflows, people can feel that peace. But as you say rightly, the first stage is really detaching, because if God's love is true love, then every other love is superficial. And as long as you're attached to superficial love, you'll find that that true essence of the love of God cannot be achieved. So for us it's important that we break all of this. And then after that, when you do finally attach yourself to that absolute love, then you'll find that your love for everyone else increases as well. Because now your lens is the lens of God. And as you know, God loves you more than, let's say, 70 mothers, but even more than that. So because of that, you actually become a better, if I would use the word lover, so to speak, of humanity, when you're looking at it from the lens of God. As opposed to at the moment, where human love, for example, may be coupled with senses and desires. It's not pure. So hence, I guess, all of us are working to come to know God. And in essence, it's unfolding. So as you make that spiritual journey, slowly but surely, the divine is revealing itself onto you. And it's a very private journey, by the way. Not everyone, or you don't feel the same thing. So every mystic in itself will feel a different reflection, because we're all unique. So the divine unfolds itself onto us in different ways. And you're waiting for the next moment that there's a vision, or there's something which is unfolded to you, or there's that moment of elation. And that's what you live for. That slowly but surely, as your connection increases, eventually you get to a state where you are always with the divine. Yeah. So you are always excited and happy. And for you, pain is separation. And this is why if you look at all the greatest love stories that have been written, they've been written by mystics.
Yeah.
Because they understand the power of separation. Mm-hmm. And separation breaks you. So all of these, whether it's Romeo and Juliet, or Layli and Majnun, or whatever it may be, in all of these stories, they're mystics. Mm-hmm. What do they talk about? Through the metaphor of human love, which by the way is the most powerful. The closest you're going to get to human love is husband and wife. Mm-hmm. In terms of godly love. Because as I said before once upon a time, that a mother loves a child. That's not reciprocated though. In the Quran, you're told not to say off to your mother. But your mother's not told to love you, because by nature you do. So a mother will always love their child more than you can ever love. But when it comes to husband and wife or spouses, if it's true love, you find that both love is so high, at a high level, at a reciprocal level, that it becomes a bridge to the love of God.
Okay, you talk about self-love, and for me, I believe self-love is self-knowledge, right? Knowing yourself. And like Imam Ali has said, that to know yourself is to know your God, right? But it's so interesting that I feel like there is a motivation in today's world where, obviously, in order for the world to control you, for the world to tell you, buy this, be this, wear this, they're taking you away from yourself, right? It's like a vicious cycle. I feel you're on social media the whole day, so you're away from yourself, to the point that I know personally, I'm not even going to talk about anybody else. You know, I started this journey of just like, you know, this self-love journey, which was started off with just knowing myself. And it was so difficult to just sit in silence because I would start to get very hyper vigilant because, you know, I was sitting with myself and, you know, I like no distractions. But I kept doing it and I kept doing it and I kept doing it, and I realized that it's so interesting what the world is trying to do to you, right? They're trying to take you away from yourself, and if, once you don't know yourself, how can you love yourself? And if you can't love yourself, how can you love God, right? So there is this issue that's going around with so many of us. We're all suffering, you know, because again, you know, we don't know who we are. So what are like a couple of steps you would suggest, like micro steps that people can take every day to kind of understand who they are?
It's a good question. If I may start from the beginning. In the Quran, Allah says, Allahu nur as-samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. The light that He uses is singular. Within you and me contains the same light. And within that light contains God. So God isn't there, God is there. This is created from light. Everything around you is created. The batin of it, the intrinsic reality of everything in creation, from this glass to these cameras, inside of it is the light of God. Outside you have different manifestations. So in this way, when you're self-journeying, the love of the self is the love of God. Because deep down inside of you is contained God. Yeah. So actually when you're journeying, you're not journeying outer, you're actually journeying inner. Your universe is within yourself. And because you're connected through light, then you're connected to the whole universe. So everything around you, if you look at it on a philosophical level, whether it be the vegetative or the mineral or the physical, the animal, everything is inside of you. So the first thing is really to come to know oneself. You know where the issue comes in? At the moment, social media is engineered in such a way that your focus after 9 to 10 minutes is lost. Where Tawheed lies is at unity. So actually it's counterproductive. What you're seeing today from social media or from what we have is the inability to be able to focus. But in all forms of mysticism, focus is extremely important to get to God. So in fact, if I was to say, we use this term, the Antichrist, so to speak, is actually in front of you, it's in your pockets. It's that buzz that comes that after 9 minutes you can't focus anymore. Yeah. And some of our children now, after 7 minutes, they're fidgeting because they just can't focus. So if you look at it, it goes against all of traditional faiths. What traditional faiths want you to do is the ability to be conscious of yourself. In fact, what we call meditation, in Islam we call it muraqabah. Muraqabah basically is to be able to become vigilant of oneself. Now look, if I was to turn around and say, right, let's try and get rid of all of these negative thoughts, it's not going to happen immediately. So if I was to advise, I would say that at least either in the morning when you wake up or before you go to sleep, one should be in a meditative state, even if it's for 5 minutes. As a Muslim, what would I do? Well, I would put Allah on the wall, for example, and just focus upon it for 5 minutes. Negative thoughts will come in your mind. You don't need to negate them. You just need to personify that Allah. And this is what dhikr is. You know, when you find that the mystic sits and he recites Allah, Allah, Allah. When he says Allah, he's focusing on it, or she's focusing on it. Now, 5,000 thoughts are going to come in. What car should I buy? Should I get my car insured? What am I going to cook? All of those things. Let it come, but just keep on focusing. Allah, 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 Allah. For argument's sake, 5 minutes later, you'll find yourself at a level of peace. Because why? Because ala bi dhikr Allah tatma'innul qulub. So it's Allah dhikr that gives you peace of heart. If that 5 minutes goes to 10 minutes, that 10 minutes goes to half an hour. And as you know, half an hour of that, you'll see you get to that level of peace. And essentially what you're doing, as the Hindus would say, you're getting rid of the maya. You're getting rid of that illusion. So everything outside of you is an illusion to distract you. In the time of Kali Yoga, now to use a Hindu term, time of Kali Yoga, this distraction is what removes you from God. And what are we doing? Through the dhikr, through that focus. Because if I tell you be present all the time, it's not going to work. You know, it's, with phones, and some of us have 2 of them and now we have 3 phones, it's not going to work. So what do we need to do? That 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, and perhaps once a month have a detox. You know, the Jews have a very good thing, they have Shabbat, 25 hours without a phone switched off, and they're not doing too badly, you know, and there you go, 25 hours. So they're focusing. And in the evenings they get together, and I've been to many Shabbats, and you get together and you speak as a family, you sit down together. That family comfort is important because Allah's created us to be able to do that. This, I guess, is the only generation where you find that son is sitting in one room in front of the television eating, daughter's out, for example, with her friends, eating over the husband and wife when we're looking at our phones. That's, and grandchildren are playing around us. No, sit down together, eat as a family. So within religions you do find amazing things which you need to plug. And Islam also teaches that. Sit as a family, eat as a family, talk to one another, switch off your phones. You should have a policy. When you come onto the table, make sure your phones are outside. Sit out, leave the phone, let's sit down as a family, let's talk. How was your day? How was things? Let's talk about this, let's do that.
One thing that helps is when I'm out with my nieces and my nephews, actually just last week, everyone was on their phone. So I took their phones and I said, look, I'm going to put it in my bag. The first person to touch it has to pay the bill. So then nobody touched the phone. And we ended up having such a wonderful time because you're actually connecting then, as opposed to you just... And the thing is, you're not doing anything on your phone anyways. It's like, I just don't understand, if you're out to dinner with somebody, why would you be on the phone to talk to someone else? But I guess this is the nature of this phone. That's what it's trying to do, distract you from the moment, right?
And you are distracted. So we can't live without distractions because you know what? We get bored. So you're getting bored, what do I do? Okay, let's go to my phone. Yeah. But that's not the case. So you're completely right. And I'm sure you were lumbered with the bill afterwards.
Big time. Yeah, I was. You obviously you've done so much work on interfaith, and a lot of my friends now, they tell me, well, we're spiritual.
Right.
We're not religious, but we're spiritual. We don't want to be characterized as religious.
Right.
And this is something that, I explain to them. I say, okay, look, the reason why I feel it's important is because when you have to pray 5 times a day, it gives you a sense of discipline. When you have to fast 30 days in Ramadan, it gives you a sense of discipline, right? It's like the same way where, in order, if you're drowning,
yes,
you can't just use any stroke, right, that you want to survive. You have to know the correct stroke in order to swim to survive, right? So in my head, this is the kind of discussion I have with them, where you need a discipline. You need to know how to get to God, right? But how would you explain this to somebody who says, well, I believe that, because you've mentioned this, is everybody has their own journey towards God.
Nice.
Everybody has the light of God inside them. So who cares how you get there?
And again, it's a very important question. In the Western world, early part of the 20th century, or in fact, going towards the end of the 19th century, you found slowly there were movements which came into play to go back to tradition. And you find that in the 20th century there was a perennial school. Later on, you had the René Renan, the likes of Frechon Chouan, and today, at Georgetown, you've got Said Hussein Nasser, very famous philosopher, the top philosophers in the world. These are people who want the world, or in essence, took philosophy back to its tradition, took theology back to its tradition. So, a person who turns around and says, especially within this new age, we're spiritual. Well, who are you following? Rumi? Rumi was a practicing Muslim. So you're taking quotes from Rumi, but you're not understanding the essence. The fact that he was a practicing Muslim, practicing Sufi mystic. Or for example, Ibn Arabi. Oh, Ibn Arabi, so great. But what was he? Practicing Muslim. And in the same way, if you take any of the mystics, whether they be Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever it may be, each one of them were very much firm in their faith. So in the 20th century and now in the 21st century, if you realize, there's an idea of initiation. And initiation here basically means to be put or brought into the circle of a particular discipline or a particular order. The perennial school saw that religions are a form of an initiation. And the idea was that if you are part of this initiation, you're part of a wholesome order, a way towards God. Yes, all paths lead to Damascus, let's say. Many paths, many turuq towards Allah. But you have to be on an authentic pathway to get to God. And I always say, if you're a Christian, be a good Christian. If you're a Jew, be a good Jew. If you're a good Muslim, be a good Muslim. Because these are initiations, these are pathways for you to actually get to God. Where are you going to come through and understand spiritual exercise? It's part of your faith. So for example, if a Jew is fasting, let's say, for the whole day, or Muslims are fasting in the month of Ramadan, the essence is fasting, yes. We have it in all of our disciplines. And as you know, fasting is the best method to get to God because it quickly destroys the veils. But how to fast, the conditions of fasting, is what your faith tells you. For example, Christians would come to Mass. Jews pray 3 times a day. Muslims as well, 5 prayers. For us, 5 prayers 3 times a day. So within this is a methodology to get to God. So in essence, and even within the mystical Christian circles, so for example, whether you're Rosicrucian, there needs an initiation. You've got to follow the principles. The Masonic, the Freemasons, for example, as well, initiation, and they have certain principles that you'd have to follow. Or the Christian orders, Knights of Columbus and so forth, the Catholic order, sorry. So each mystical order may have their own spiritual practices, but the essence, the outer is the same. You've got to follow the tenets of your faith. And in this time, there is a push now towards tradition that you must follow these particular principles, because without them, your roadmap is incomplete. You know, to give you an example from a UK perspective, if I don't give you a map, give you a nice car, your car's the mysticism, right? The nice car. But if there's no roadmap, you'll be going around the M25 for the rest of the evening, and you wouldn't be able to get to Harrow, or wherever you want to go, to Luton or South London or wherever it may be. So in this way, a religion is an authentic methodology that teaches you step by step how to get to God. And so hence, whichever religion you follow, these are all authentic traditions in their own light. And of course, as Muslims, we'd say, right, our faith, for example, is a complete version of that Abrahamic message or the Adamic message. And a Christian may say that their faith isn't. We're not here for the theological discussion, right? So I'm not here to discuss who's correct, what's not correct. But as Muslims, we do believe that there were faiths before us. They were divine faiths, whether by Moses or Jesus or Abraham. Follow your faith. Follow it properly and get to God. Simple as that.
Yeah, and obviously things are becoming difficult now, which is why it's so hard for people to follow a discipline.
Yes.
It's so hard for people because, again, you can't sit still to pray. Whatever religion you're in, it's like, you know, it's so hard to like just sit down and pray. Even if it's just 2 rakats in the morning, your mind is, you know, and it's very interesting how shaitan works. You know, when you're praying, you have like all these lists coming to you. But I guess, you know, you've mentioned that through just meditating slowly, you know, I couldn't even meditate. I would do a lot of movement meditation at the beginning because, again, just sitting with I guess my life and my mind was so overactive. And, you know, we glamorize these things, these like 14-hour work days, and we're like, oh, this is amazing, you know. And then 10 years later, you're like, who am I? What am I doing? What am I chasing? You know, and you realize that, first of all, you have no peace. You know, you're chasing something that doesn't even exist, right? You can be on the cover of one of the biggest magazines and you're still thinking, well, I want more. But what is more, right? And so you go to sleep, you're not peaceful, and now your body starts to, and I do believe very much that the further away you get from yourself, the further away you get from your God, your body starts to neglect itself. It starts to like send you signals, something's going on, something's going on. Or this was my personal journey, you know. So I started so slowly, and this is why I started this podcast, because I feel like you can't even overwhelm people these days. You can't. You have to just give them such small tips to do every day. It just started with 2 minutes of breathing, 2 minutes of meditation, like 2 minutes of like yoga, and then now slowly you start to build up a routine where you're spending more. I used to hate spending time alone. I used to make my schedule so packed that I'd make sure that I was busy the whole day. Right. And now it's like I crave time to be on my own, because that's when I can reflect, right? And what is Imam Ali said, that everything you need is inside you if only you reflect, right? And I think this is one of the biggest issues we have with ourselves, this time that we need to take out for ourselves to reflect, to think, to be accountable. What did we do today? What did we eat? How did we treat this person? We're going about life, and then this is how we hurt people. This is how we do things unknowingly. We live life without a sense of purpose because you don't even know who you are, right? And so I think it, like you said, you know, it doesn't matter what religion, what faith you have, but follow a methodology to get to God, right? And speaking of of God, and speaking of, like you mentioned Imam Hussein earlier, and why we have this love. And whenever I'm speaking to my non-Muslim friends or even my non-Shia friends, this obsession with Imam Hussein, it's not an obsession, it's this deep love we have, right? As human beings, we're forgetful people, right? It would have been that we forgot Imam Hussein, and this tragedy happened 1,400 years ago. But why is it that for us as Shias, we feel such a deep connection to Imam Hussein, to the Ahlul Bayt? Why? Why does it happen?
It's part of the miracle. Pain is such that either it kills you, it makes you stronger, but over a period of time, you overcome it. And I don't think there's been any pain that hasn't eventually been overcome. Some great people lived in our lifetime. Mother Teresa, who remembers when she died now? All of the great things that she did. Saint Mother Teresa died in 97. But today, though we remember her, but it doesn't bring you to tears. In the same way, many great leaders have come within Islam and gone. Many great people in the world have come and gone. Founders of countries have come and gone. Imam Hussein is unique. He's the only person in creation that I've come across that actually brings millions of people to tears. And I think that's the miracle. The miracle of Imam Hussein is 1400 years later, you don't know what he looks like. You don't know what his favorite dish was. You don't know how he spent his time. There's really nothing, if he walked past you today, technically we wouldn't know who he was, because we've never seen him. But for some reason, when these 10 days of Muharram come, and you sit down and you reflect, you're brought to tears. So there is an emotional connection. And it's interesting because anyone who goes to Imam Hussein, you'll find that they tend to develop that. And I've had people from across faiths who have gone to Imam Hussein and they feel that. And they feel that connection. Just a couple of nights ago, in fact, I say a couple of 2 nights ago, you saw people of the Hindu faith come. Tonight you'll see people from Sunni traditions and otherwise come. And why is that? It's not because they're Muslim, or not because they're Shia, but because Imam Hussein is such a universal figure. We may put borders up and restrictions on who can come into our mosques, but Imam Hussein doesn't do that. His door's open for everyone, and it doesn't matter who you are, from which walk of life you're from. So for us, we're connected, and in the deepest moments, when you go through tragedy, and you come to a majlis of Imam Hussein, for that 1 hour, you forget your own pain. It's as if Imam takes your pain out, and you're there in the moment. And it's beautiful, because generally you're not there in the moment. As you say, you busy yourself 14-hour days. What are we trying to hide? Our pain, our suffering. We just don't want to cope with it, so we chuck ourselves into work to try and overcome it. Maybe you've gone through a tragedy. Maybe you've gone through a very desperate type of situation whereby you've been separated. Some people go through divorce. It's killing, right? Going through a divorce is like losing a partner or losing a family member. It's like death. And it takes years for people to heal. So you busy yourself in your work, with the hope that one day a love can come which is greater than that, so that I can overcome it. What does Imam Hussein do? When you're sitting there, everything kind of melts away. And there's an emotional connection. It's as if Imam Hussein is saying, you leave your problems with me, and I'll take care of you. So it's beautiful. It's a connection which I couldn't describe. I can't describe the miracle of Imam Hussein. You know why? Because that's the nature of miracles. It's beyond my comprehension. Why is it that we, in 2023, are sitting here discussing a man who died 1400 odd years ago? But we are, and guess what? Generations will continue to discuss in the way that our parents have done. So there is a great power there. And I think anybody who attaches themselves to this message of Imam Hussein, they tend to feel this energy, regardless of which background they're from, which faith they're from, which religion they're from. So he is a figure that brings peace to people's lives. And he is a figure that puts things into perspective. And we can look at his life, and we can look at the history of his life, and we could debate whether this was correct and this wasn't correct. But you know what? Deep down inside, above the history, above the books, above what people say, each one of us has a personal connection. And it's almost as if it's like a father figure. And you know what the weird thing is? That even within the pain of Imam Hussein, you feel happy as well. Muharram comes about, and you feel sad, but there's also a happiness of belonging. It's like I belong somewhere now. It's like I've come home. Yeah. And you feel that when you go to Karbala. For anyone who's gone to Karbala, they'll notice this, and people from other faiths as well. people from other faiths, gurus from other faiths, without mentioning names. It's famous, if you go online, you'll see certain gurus who go to the, I remember seeing Rabbi Ravi Shankar go there. Shri Ravi Shankar went to Karbala on 3 occasions, or at least a number of years ago it was 3 occasions, and he also helps orphans in Karbala. But if you look at people who are going there, people who want to go there, why do they go there? There's some kind of an affinity that they have, which goes beyond the borders of faith. And I guess this is why, coming back to your original question, mysticism is important. It helps us to transgress borders. We build borders. Otherwise, all of you are what? Yabna Adam. We're children of Adam. In essence, that's what we are. We're related. How are we related? All of us in this room are, because we're the children of Adam. We've created borders because you're African, and I'm British, and you're American, and I'm Muslim, and you're Christian, and you're atheist. Actually, hang on a minute, let's break all of that down. What are we? We're all Adam and the children of Adam. And I guess Imam Hussein takes us back to origin. And I think this is what Imam Hussein important.
Yeah. And it's so beautifully said, because even when you go to the harem of Imam Hussein, or what you would call it in the West is like this spiritual positive energy, right? But it's coming from somewhere, right? This positive energy, because this is evidence when you go to certain places, there's an energy there that maybe it's a negative energy, and people can feel it, right? But when you go to Imam Hussein, there's this energy there that it's almost like your heart is where it's supposed to be, right? It's in a place of peace, right? And I think one of the most beautiful things is that, and for me, power, the ability to be so much in control of yourself and be so emotionally regulated in situations where there's chaos. And I think Imam Hussein exemplifies this. And it's not even be in a sense of peace, it's be so loving. The way he acted, right, while he was in the midst of tragedy, how he was caring, how he was forgiving, how he was loving. He when he would speak to his daughter Sakina, he would come down to her level in the midst of tragedy, right? He would come down to the level. It's that sense of knowing who you are and not changing that for any circumstance. That is true power. These days I feel like we have, for me, my definition of power has changed, because I was asked recently, like, what's one of the most important skills to have? And I believe it's emotional regulation. Right. We are such slaves to our emotions these days. Something will happen, react. Something will happen, react. But imagine a man who, there's no reactivity. Everything was coming from a place of love. Everything was coming from a place of peace. And being in an environment where you're literally in complete tragedy, you are in a place where you're being you're being abused in emotionally, physically, but maintaining yourself, going back to who you are. That is the beauty, and I think that is true power, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. He had control over his emotions, which meant that he was in control, not being reactive. And again, I guess this is one of the big lessons that we find within mysticism. Many a time we react. Yeah. We're reactive. Reaction is like this. So when a person reacts, they feel that they're gaining something. So let's say, for example, in the month of Ramadan, first couple of days, we're on edge. You're driving your car, somebody cuts you up, you want to, some people want to swear, some people want to shout, whatever it is. And you realize you're reacting. And reaction is like this. You've got these bulbs here. Have you ever seen a bulb fuse? When it fuses, loads of light comes, and then it cuts as a downer. When we react, we increase that volume of light, but what happens afterwards is a downer. So whenever a human being reacts, what you're doing is you're strengthening your ego and you're pushing yourself away from God. Now, one of the reasons why God has created time for is take a breath, take a step back, let time go by. Now when you make a decision, don't make it from a reactive position. Make that decision so you're connected to the light continuously, as opposed to all of a sudden, as a light bulb increases and then bang, cuts. So if you look at Imam Hussein, he's the antithesis of all the chaos. He's the balance in the chaos, because he's the one at peace, complete, and he's balancing everything. And this is the purpose of a wali, a saint, A saint in creation balances. War, chaos, shouting. Imam Hussein, peace.
Yeah.
So he balances the negativity.
Yeah.
One man balances the negativity of 30,000 wrong intentions. And the ability to be able to do that is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the lesson is for us, that before you make a decision in life, before you want to react to something, and in particular when you have difficulty, you just say, God forbid, you're having an argument with your spouse. At that moment, take a step back. Balance. Don't react. Why? Light. Then there'll be a downer. And you'll feel the downer. It's like you're going for a downer now. God forbid, it's like you're on drugs or something and all of a sudden there's a downer.
Yeah.
If you stay balanced and you don't react, you yourself feel that you've fulfilled yourself.
Yeah. And it's such a miracle. I love Islamic history, and in every war, in every part of history, there are some people who will have something negative to say. But when you read about Imam Hussein, it's nowhere to be seen. And that is such a miracle because of his character. At the end of the day, it's his character that spoke up, on the day of Ashura. And I think, it's, for us as Shias, it's not about only being a good Muslim, but this is the journey we need to take to becoming a better human being, to becoming better partners, to becoming better mothers, right? And I think that at its core, it's so important to journey within yourself, to, you mentioned this, like to find the shimmer in you, right? And to understand why is it that you do these horrible things. There's a meditation that I used to do, and it's like a meditation for your ego, right? And basically when you have a thought and you're like, oh, this really angered me, you ask yourself, why? Why am I angry, right? Why did this upset me? What is it in me that maybe is reacting to this, right? And I think that these are the questions we need to keep asking ourselves, and instead of focusing on outside, you did this, you need to be a better person. Imagine the amount of control and power you have if you just talk to yourself and you go within instead of outside.
That's a very good observation.
It's observation through, I think, a lot of experience, and I am very grateful that I had the opportunity to do this, to not get carried away by my work, which was a distraction, or the things outside me. But I think one of the last questions I have for you is, a lot of people are suffering, like you said, people are struggling so much with their mental health, with things around them. What are simple things that we can do every day to kind of start this journey, of self-love?
I think it's very practical. Mother Teresa, for most of her life, went through spiritual depression, and where she found solace and peace was in serving other people. We have similar tradition to that as well. I guess if a person wants to get to peace, the most important thing first of all is to empathize and help other people. People who are suffering. If you focus your attention on helping others, then you'll see that slowly but surely you start achieving peace within your own self. So I think if I was to start this journey, I would say firstly, help people. People who are hungry, clothe people, put people in schools. It's not just about writing a check, it's about physically doing it yourself. Because writing a check is simple, but when you're physically doing it yourself, then you see the change that comes inside of you. So I would say that's the first thing. Second thing, as you said, meditation. Take 5 minutes out for yourself in the morning, whatever it may be, take some time out for yourself. Be in the moment. And then I think the final thing I would say, is to keep it very short and brief, is to work on yourself. Work on what triggers your emotions, negative emotions. Don't be reactive. Just remember, be connected to the light. That connection requires you not to be reactive. And so therefore you'll see that in any given situation, when you feel like reacting, close your mouth, take a deep breath, let time go, and then think the best course of action. And I think if we start doing that, you'll feel more happier.
I agree. One of my professors at Georgetown, he was a management teacher. Because I went to business school, and one day he came to us and he said, do you want to know how to be happy and successful? So we were so excited, and he said, in order to find success and happiness, find a purpose that's greater than yourself. you know.
Right.
And I think that is essential for everybody. Find something bigger than you, because if it's about you, then anything can come in life, and you know, we all go through our adversities, and it can knock you out. But if your purpose is bigger than that, then nothing can take you down. So thank you so much, Sayed, for taking your time to come on this podcast. It was such an honor to hear from you, and to just, you know, have this conversation from a mystical, you know, religious perspective, taking into account all the other religions as well and what they have to say about spirituality and our connection to God. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be on your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.